There's a lot of times you disagree with the concept of a scene, the writing, the directing. My rule of thumb on it is the director is supposed to be the captain.
In 1963, Hollywood's most respected star became its most hated co-star. "I'd rather stick needles in my eyes than work with her again," Charlton Heston wrote after a disastrous film. The reason? Her terrible breath, constant lateness, and a shocking betrayal that made him refuse to even look at her on set. Now, 60 years later, we reveal what really happened between Moses and his leading lady, and why their feud changed Hollywood forever. Charlton Heston was born on October 4, 1923, in a small town in Illinois called No Man's Land. His parents, Lila and Russell Carter, were struggling to keep their sawmill running during the Great Depression. Life was tough for the family, and they had to move often, trying to find better opportunities. When Charlton was 10 years old, his parents divorced, which was a shocking and painful event for him. His mother later married Chester Heston, and Charlton took his stepfather's last name, creating the name we all know today. Even as a child, Charlton stood out. When he was just 5, he surprised everyone by reciting "The Night Before Christmas" from memory, while standing on a tree stump in the town square. In high school, Charlton's journey into acting began completely by chance. At New Trier High School in Illinois, he decided to try out for the school play, The Wrecker's Daughter, without expecting much. To his surprise, he got the lead role. This unexpected moment ignited his passion for acting. His drama teacher, Priscilla Weaver, quickly noticed his talent and started giving him challenging roles. One of those was Macbeth, where Charlton showed his ability to dominate the stage with his powerful voice, even though he was terrified of performing. His dedication and natural talent caught the attention of a talent scout from Northwestern University, and in 1941, he was offered a drama scholarship. At Northwestern, Charlton threw himself into acting. He performed in 30 roles over just 2 years, pushing himself to the limit. He often had only 4 hours of sleep each night because of his heavy workload. One of the highlights of this time was his role in a low-budget student film adaptation of Peer Gynt. This film became his unofficial debut, even though it wasn't a big production. While at college, he also met Lydia Clark during a theater production. They fell in love and got married in 1944. Their marriage lasted an incredible 64 years, becoming one of Hollywood's rare, long-lasting relationships. When World War II broke out, Charlton joined the Army Air Forces in 1944. He felt it was his duty to serve after the attack on Pearl Harbor. He trained as a radio operator and gunner for B-25 bombers and was stationed in the Aleutian Islands, a cold and remote area. The conditions were harsh, with freezing weather and long periods of isolation. During one mission, his plane had to make an emergency landing on a tiny island. He and the crew were stranded for 3 days before being rescued. Despite these challenges, Charlton used his downtime to study acting and memorize Shakespeare's works, showing how dedicated he was to his craft. After the war, Charlton and Lydia moved to New York City to chase their dreams of working in theater. They lived in a tiny apartment in Hell's Kitchen and took on small jobs as artists' models to make a living. In 1947, Charlton got his big break on Broadway, landing a role in a revival of Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. Although it was a supporting role, critics and industry insiders noticed his strong stage presence. He also started appearing in television dramas, including a standout performance in Wuthering Heights on CBS. A Hollywood producer named Hal B. Wallace saw his performance and offered him a movie contract. Charlton hesitated at first, but eventually agreed, with the idea that he would only try one film to see how it went. His first film was Dark City in 1950, where he played a small-time gambler. It wasn't a huge hit, but it showed Charlton's potential as a leading man. Then, in 1951, something unexpected happened. While walking on the Paramount lot, Charlton saw Cecil B. DeMille, the famous director, and decided to wave at him. That small act caught DeMille's attention. Soon after, DeMille cast Charlton in The Greatest Show on Earth in 1952. This was a massive movie about the circus, and Charlton played Brad Braden, the tough circus manager. The production involved real circus performers, and Charlton even trained with elephant handlers to prepare for the role. During filming, he narrowly avoided being trampled by a spooked elephant. The film became a huge hit, earning the Academy Award for Best Picture and turning Charlton into a Hollywood star. Charlton Heston became one of the most iconic actors of his time, especially for his unforgettable roles in historical and biblical films. His big moment came in The Ten Commandments, 1956, where he played Moses. This role changed his life forever. Director Cecil B. DeMille picked Heston because he thought he looked just like Michelangelo's famous statue of Moses. Heston's appearance and strong personality made him the perfect fit. The movie had a massive budget of $13 million, which was huge at that time. Heston worked hard to prepare for the role. He grew his beard and hair, lost 30 pounds, and even learned ancient Egyptian and Hebrew to make everything feel real. During the famous Red Sea scene, something scary happened. The special effects team made a mistake, and Heston got swept away by the water. Luckily, the crew acted fast and saved him. One surprising fact is that Heston also did the voice of God in the burning bush scene. This meant he was acting opposite himself, which he said was strange but also funny. The movie became a giant hit, earning $122.7 million and becoming the top-grossing film of 1956. Even today, it's shown on TV every Easter, and Heston's Moses is still seen as one of the greatest biblical characters ever. Heston's next huge role was as Judah Ben-Hur in Ben-Hur, 1959. This was the most important role of his career, but he wasn't the first choice. Burt Lancaster turned it down because he thought the story wasn't good. Paul Newman said no because he didn't want to wear a tunic. Even Leslie Nielsen was considered before Heston got the role in January 1958. The movie was a massive project. MGM spent $15 million, which was the largest budget ever at that time. Heston worked incredibly hard for the role. He spent over 4 months learning how to drive a chariot, practicing 5 hours every day. He even did many of his own stunts in the famous chariot race. One moment during the filming almost went terribly wrong when Heston nearly fell out of the chariot. His hard work was rewarded when he won the Oscar for Best Actor. Some people thought Jack Lemmon deserved the award for his role in Some Like It Hot, but Heston's performance was too powerful to ignore. He carried the entire movie, appearing in almost every scene of the 3.5-hour film. Ben-Hur was a huge success, winning 11 Oscars, a record that stood until Titanic tied it in 1997. Heston became known as the man Hollywood trusted for historical and biblical roles. He played 14 historical characters throughout his career, which is an incredible number. One of his first roles was Mark Antony in a 1950 version of Julius Caesar. Later, he played John the Baptist in The Greatest Story Ever Told, 1965, Michelangelo in The Agony and the Ecstasy, 1965, and Andrew Jackson in The President's Lady, 1953. His ability to bring these larger-than-life characters to the screen earned him the nickname Hollywood's go-to guy for God and country. His roles in The Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur cemented his place as one of the greatest actors of all time, and his legacy continues to inspire. Charlton Heston and Sophia Loren worked together on the 1961 film El Cid. It was a big project with two huge stars, but the set became famous for their constant fights. Producer Samuel Bronston wanted both Heston and Loren because they were famous and guaranteed to attract audiences. Heston had just starred in Ben-Hur and was Bronston's first choice to play Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, a Spanish hero. At first, Heston didn't like the script, saying it was minimally okay to crappy. But he liked the character and agreed to fly to Madrid to meet Bronston, the director Anthony Mann, and the screenwriter Philip Jordan. After discussing the role, Heston officially signed on July 26, 1960. Getting Loren to play Shameen wasn't easy. She was unavailable at first, so the producers thought about other actresses like Jeanne Moreau and Ava Gardner. There was even a rumor that Anthony Mann wanted his wife, Sarah Montiel, to get the role, but both Heston and Bronston refused. Finally, Loren became available, but could only work for 10 to 12 weeks. To get her, Bronston offered her $1 million, making her only the second actress after Elizabeth Taylor to earn that much for a movie. Loren also got a $200 weekly allowance for her personal hairdresser. Heston didn't like this, and it became one of many things that annoyed him during filming. The problem started even before shooting began. Loren demanded changes to the script just 2 days before filming. The producer had to hire blacklisted writer Ben Barsman to rewrite the script. Loren also hired another writer, Basilio Franchina, to translate her lines into Italian and then back into simple English. These delays upset Heston and Mann, who were ready to work with the original script. Loren's focus on her appearance caused more problems. She spent hours in makeup and hair, which delayed filming. Her contract allowed her these luxuries, but it slowed everything down. On one occasion, she insisted on last-minute changes to her costume, delaying an important battle scene. The delay cost the production $50,000, and Heston was furious. He was known for being on time and professional, so waiting for hours in full armor under the hot sun made him even angrier. On December 3, 1960, Loren arrived nearly 4 hours late, and Heston wrote in his diary, "Sophia's tardiness is not just unprofessional, it's downright disrespectful to everyone involved in this production." Loren's behavior also affected their scenes together. She insisted on eating garlic-heavy Italian dishes during breaks, and Heston complained about her pizza breath during close-ups. This led to awkward scheduling changes to keep her meal breaks separate from their scenes. Heston's frustration reached a breaking point when he requested a body double for Loren's close-up shots. On April 7, 1961, during a love scene, Heston refused to film directly with Loren, saying their irreconcilable differences made it impossible. The producers hired a Spanish actor, Rafael Albaicin, to stand in for Heston during Loren's close-ups. Loren didn't know about the body double at first. She found out on May 10, 1961, when she walked onto the set and saw Albaicin wearing Heston's costume. She was shocked and angry, leading to a big argument with the director and producer. Things got worse when the Spanish press published a story with the headline, "American Star Refuses to Face Italian Beauty." The tension between Heston and Loren reached its peak during the climactic death scene, where El Cid dies in Shameen's arms. Heston initially refused to film the scene. After 3 days of negotiations, he agreed to do it under strict conditions, like limiting the number of takes and keeping the crew small. When El Cid was finished, the tension between Heston and Loren didn't go away. At the movie's premiere on December 6, 1961, in London, they barely spoke to each other and only posed for photos because they had to. Later, Heston refused to work with Loren again. In 1964, he was offered a role opposite her in Lady L, but turned it down. In a letter to his agent, he wrote, "I'd rather stick needles in my eyes than work with Loren again." Loren, on her side, said in a 1966 interview, "Charlton is a fine actor, but our working styles are very different." Their feud affected their careers too. Producers didn't want to cast them together again, fearing more drama. Heston used the experience to emphasize the importance of professionalism in his autobiography, writing about difficult personalities on set. Loren later became known for being more professional in her later career, reflecting on her past mistakes in her memoir, saying, "Every film teaches you something. Sometimes the lessons are about acting, sometimes about life, and sometimes about yourself." Even decades later, their feud was remembered. During the 50th anniversary of El Cid in 2011, neither Heston nor Loren attended the event, showing how deeply the conflict had affected them. Their on-set clashes remain one of Hollywood's most famous behind-the-scenes stories. After that, Charlton Heston and Ava Gardner worked together on 55 Days at Peking in 1963, but the production was full of problems and conflicts. The movie was filmed in Spain, and from the very beginning, things went wrong. On May 15, 1962, Heston arrived on set to find that the script was incomplete, with only 140 pages of a summarized storyline. This lack of preparation set the stage for a very difficult 17 weeks of shooting. Tensions between Heston and Gardner were obvious right away. On June 2nd, Gardner hosted a cocktail party at her Madrid apartment for the cast and crew, which seemed friendly at first. But by June 10th, Heston wrote in his journal that the love story between their characters felt very arbitrary, and that the dialogue was primitive. The filming conditions were tough. Madrid's summer heat was brutal, often above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The heavy costumes and demanding action scenes made everyone's tempers short. On July 3rd, Gardner had a heated argument with director Nicholas Ray and stormed off set, delaying filming by 4 hours. The budget problems made things even worse. Originally set at $7 million, the cost of the movie ballooned to over $17 million by the time filming ended on September 28, 1962. The constant delays and tension left everyone exhausted, but the movie was finally released on May 29, 1963. However, the tough experience stayed with the cast and crew for years. Ava Gardner's behavior on set caused many problems. On her first day, June 5, 1962, she arrived 45 minutes late to the script reading and was already visibly intoxicated. Her drinking became a major issue. She often showed up drunk, sometimes as early as 10 a.m. On July 12th, she arrived so inebriated that she couldn't remember her lines, delaying filming for 3 hours. Her unpredictable actions made things worse. On August 3rd, she left the set mid-scene, claiming she was too tired to continue, which forced the crew to scrap the entire day's work, costing $50,000. On August 17th, she threw a prop vase at a cameraman in anger, narrowly missing him but damaging expensive equipment. Gardner's drinking and mood swings also affected her acting. She struggled to remember her lines and often needed multiple takes for even simple scenes. On September 5th, it took 27 takes to complete a straightforward dialogue scene because she couldn't focus. By the end of filming, her behavior had added at least $2 million to the movie's costs through delays, reshoots, and overtime pay. The tension on set was so bad that some crew members requested to be reassigned to different units to avoid working with her. Charlton Heston, known for his professionalism, was deeply frustrated by Gardner. He wrote in his journal on July 20th, 1962, "Ava showed up 3 hours late today, reeking of gin. It's becoming impossible to work with her. Her unprofessionalism is staggering." On August 8th, he noted, "Another day wasted waiting for Ava to remember her lines. This woman is single-handedly derailing the entire production." After the movie's release, Heston was more open about his feelings. In a September 1963 interview with Photoplay magazine, he said, "Working with Ava Gardner was undoubtedly the most challenging experience of my career. Her behavior was not just unprofessional, it was destructive to the entire process of filmmaking." Years later, in his 1995 autobiography In the Arena, Heston wrote, "Ava Gardner on the set of 55 Days at Peking was a force of chaos. Her chronic lateness, her apparent disregard for her fellow actors, and her often inebriated state made every day a test of patience. It was, without exaggeration, the worst working relationship I've ever had with a co-star." He also described an incident on August 25th, when Gardner arrived drunk, stumbled through her lines, and verbally abused the director and several crew members. When Heston tried to intervene, she turned on him. He admitted, "It took every ounce of my professional restraint not to walk off the set then and there." Heston also criticized her acting in a 1970 film comment interview, saying, "Ava's performance in 55 Days was salvaged more by the editor than by any effort on her part. The number of usable takes was shockingly low." Despite his frustrations, Heston acknowledged her star power in a 1980 American film interview, saying, "For all her faults, and they were numerous, Ava had an undeniable screen presence. When she managed to pull herself together, which was far too infrequently, she could be mesmerizing." More than a decade later, Heston and Gardner reunited for Earthquake in 1974. Many were surprised they agreed to work together again after their rocky past. Heston was hesitant, but accepted the role because of a $600,000 paycheck. At first, things went smoothly, and Heston wrote in his journal on February 10, 1974, "Ava seems different, more focused, less volatile. Perhaps time has mellowed us both." But by the third week, tensions resurfaced. On February 25th, Gardner arrived 2 hours late, hungover, which led to a heated argument. Heston reportedly shouted, "It's like 55 days all over again." Despite these setbacks, they managed to finish the movie. The earthquake scenes, filmed using groundbreaking sense-around technology, proved to be a bonding experience for the two stars. Gardner later reflected in her autobiography, "Charlton and I may have had our differences, but when those tremors started, we were in it together. There's nothing like shared adversity to put past conflicts into perspective." When Earthquake was released in November 1974, critics praised their on-screen chemistry, with Roger Ebert writing, "Whatever real-life tension exists between these two stars has been alchemized into a compelling portrayal of a marriage in crisis." Years later, Heston reflected more kindly on their collaboration, saying in a 1985 interview, "Working with Ava on Earthquake was, let's say, an opportunity for growth. We both brought our A game, perhaps driven by a mutual desire to prove something to each other." Despite their conflicts, their performances left a lasting impression. Charlton Heston had a love story that was rare in Hollywood. He married Lydia Clark in 1944, and they stayed together for 64 years until his death in 2008. They met in an acting class at Northwestern University. At first, Lydia didn't like him at all. She thought he was arrogant and way too confident. But their first date changed everything. Lydia fell completely in love with him after they talked, and she said yes to his proposal through a telegram, which seems funny now but was sweet at the time. They got married on March 17, 1944, in a small ceremony just before Heston left for World War II. The wedding was simple. Heston spent only $12 on Lydia's ring, and she wore a violet dress with a matching hat. Heston later said that image of her stayed in his mind forever. Decades later, they celebrated their 50th anniversary in a big way. Over 200 friends and family came, all dressed in black tie. Heston even made booklets called Pursuing Lydia, a chapter from his upcoming autobiography, as a special gift. For this big moment, he upgraded Lydia's original engagement ring with diamonds, a thoughtful and loving gesture. Heston and Lydia became parents in a surprising way. After struggling to have children for years, they adopted their son Fraser in 1955. Just 3 months later, Lydia found out she was pregnant. Their daughter Holly was born in 1961, and suddenly they went from having no children to 2. Fraser grew up to become a filmmaker and even worked with his father, directing him in Treasure Island. Holly tried acting for a while, but eventually chose a quieter life. Heston was a very involved father, which was rare for big stars back then. Holly said he always gave her his full attention whenever they were together, which she cherished. As Heston's career went on, he started taking on different kinds of roles. In the 1970s and 1980s, he moved from being the main hero to playing more complex characters. One of his most talked about roles was Cardinal Richelieu in The Three Musketeers. He played a scheming and ruthless character, which was very different from his usual heroic roles. Critics loved it and called it one of his best performances. Around this time, Heston also starred in disaster movies, which were hugely popular then. He acted in films like Airport 1975 and Earthquake. For Earthquake, theaters used a special effect called Censor Round, which made the seats shake like a real earthquake. Heston also tried directing in 1982 with a movie called Mother Lode, which his son Fraser wrote. It wasn't a big hit, but it showed that Heston was willing to try new things. Some of his most famous roles were in Planet of the Apes and Soylent Green. In Planet of the Apes, Heston played an astronaut who crash lands on a planet ruled by intelligent apes. The shocking twist at the end, where he realizes it's actually Earth, became one of the most famous endings in movie history. Heston's emotional line, "You maniacs, you blew it up," is still remembered today. For the sequel, he agreed to appear only if his character was killed off, and he donated his entire salary to charity. In Soylent Green, he played a detective in a world with severe overpopulation and food shortages. The big twist, that Soylent Green is made from human remains, became legendary. A touching behind-the-scenes detail is that Edward G. Robinson, Heston's co-star, was dying of cancer during filming. His final scene in the movie was also his last ever in real life. Heston later said he was haunted by the thought of Robinson filming his own death scene, knowing it was the end for him. In 2003, Heston was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President George W. Bush. This honor came a year after Heston revealed he had symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Even though his health was declining, he attended the ceremony with grace. The award recognized his acting career, including roles like Moses in the Ten Commandments and his political activism, especially as president of the NRA. His famous phrase, "From my cold, dead hands," became iconic. His last public appearance as NRA president, despite his illness, was powerful. He raised a rifle one final time, showing his unshakable spirit. In August 2002, Charlton Heston shared some difficult news with the world. He was 78 years old and revealed through a recorded video that doctors had told him he might have Alzheimer's disease. This was a big moment because back then, famous people rarely talked about personal health struggles like this. In the video, Heston spoke calmly, but with emotion. He said, "I wanted to say these words now because, when the time comes, I might not be able to." Fans admired his strength as he added, "I'm neither giving up nor giving in," showing the same courage he was known for in his movies. Just 2 years earlier, he had been in a clinic for alcohol treatment, so this news added to the challenges he had faced recently. Heston's announcement came 8 years after his friend Ronald Reagan had shared his own Alzheimer's diagnosis. Both were larger-than-life figures, and now they faced a similar struggle. Heston's decision to go public was praised by many. People said it was a brave move that could help others feel less afraid to talk about their own health issues. After this, Heston began stepping away from the spotlight. He had spent over 50 years as one of Hollywood's biggest stars, so this was not easy for him. He once said, "For an actor, there is no greater loss than the loss of his audience." In 2003, he also left his role as president of the National Rifle Association. His farewell speech at their convention was unforgettable. Sadly, the illness progressed quickly. By 2005, just 3 years after his diagnosis, family and friends were shocked at how much he had changed. The man who once played strong heroes on screen was now too weak to get out of bed. Fans who loved him as Moses in the Ten Commandments and Judah Ben-Hur in Ben-Hur found this especially heartbreaking. On April 5, 2008, Charlton Heston passed away at his home in Beverly Hills. He was 84 years old, and his wife of 64 years, Lydia, was with him. Later, it was reported that he had died of pneumonia, which is common in Alzheimer's patients. News of his death spread quickly, and tributes poured in from around the world. President George W. Bush called him a man of character and integrity with a big heart. Many remembered his incredible acting career, while others admired his work in the civil rights movement and his later efforts as an advocate for gun rights. Heston's funeral was held on April 12, 2008, at his church in Pacific Palisades. About 250 people attended, including big names like Nancy Reagan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tom Selleck, and Christian Bale. It was a reminder of how much he had influenced both Hollywood and politics.